cầm sạc hèn lông dụa bồn ở rân số đây phone ở kia bà lưu cái sầm lên cho bà bà ok hay mới xong xua môi phone đã tập mau tin đi lực tìm môi xong lực đai bà xong thơ sờ quay đi lực tìm môi nữa và hai chia mà pay từ mà pay phía rồi ok chẳng mơ tới mày đếp flight này đấy bà flight việc mấy bà chẳng mau tiền đấy cái này ní ok very good nhưng là miền Cam thì tràn chỉ bận tập tiết trong năm ní rồi sân ba cả này covid ní sạn bà chẳng bận đấy còn mình toàn hiên sẵn giá thế tại bậc thà sàn phiệp nâng nô bài ní hay pro sao chừng ní nhưng là miền Cam thì căn đặt tràn tới hay nâng nóm ôn tặng óc ní cho xã công tiệt bà cho xã công tiệt chẳng như miền program chớ nè chẳng xôm o côn chua mốc oi việc mình để quạt vừa tập nào tam plei miền ca dư dao rồi sẽ trả cho xôm o côn chỉ trả trong cái ọt một bọc ôn và ọt một phiệp ọt một cứ chia chục chơi à và ta ọt một ban phần đấy cứ sừng khơm mày bà miền sừng khơm mày đây là của cầm sực hành tay từ miền xa ơi tầm miền phiệp ọt một phần đằng bà chẳng anh ấy chia ca thơ tè môi đá tè pi smart đây tè pi area bot bà thà ta ôn ai rong chạm bàn ọt bà rồi bà mình nghĩ tới cứ bà này môn bà đây chụp con bản đất Kou Sopheap bà hay Dr. Susan hay năng Scott bà sát tại nẹt miền Bắc South lơ vì say bà chạy cái tê SME năng bà chạy cái tê thằng nào đặc nóm thằng này đặc nóm chất mà pay năm mà pay pram năm chẳng khi kết thúc về liềnនេះគឺសំខាន់សម្រាប់បងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាក្រេបជញ្ជក់យកចំណេះដឹងបទពិសោធន៍ជាក់ស្ដែងនៅទីនេះព្រោះពេលខ្លះបងប្អូនអាចអានសភៅទៅចំណាយពេលយូរបាទមួយក្បាលពីរក្បាលអាចមួយខែពីរខែបានចប់ប៉ុន្តែជាន័យសង្ខេបជាមូលន័យសង្ខេបវាគ្មិនទាំង3ខ្ញុំគិតថាអាចពូនច្របាច់សភៅហ្នឹងក្នុងរយៈពេលតែ1ម៉ោងឬក៏1ម៉ោងកន្លះគ្រប់គ្រាន់សម្រាប់បងប្អូនយកទៅប្រើប្រាស់អនុវត្តក្នុងជីវភាពគ្រួសារផ្ទាល់ខ្លួនក្នុងប្រចាំថ្ងៃក៏ដូចជាកិច្ចការប្រចាំថ្ងៃអញ្ចឹងសូមយកចិត្តទុកដាក់ស្ដាប់បាទគឺសុចិបុលិគឺគោលការណ៍ទាំង4នេះត្រូវតែមានដើម្បីរៀនបានល្អគឺសុចិបុលិហ្នឹងហើយអញ្ចឹងគឺស្ដាប់គិតកត់សួរបាទអញ្ចឹងសង្ឃឹមថាហើយ LC Business School នឹងនាំមកនៅព្រឹត្តិការណ៍ថ្មីកម្មវិធីថ្មីជូនបងប្អូនទាំងអស់បាទបងគិតថាមានការប្រែប្រួលទេបងសង្កេតឃើញមានការប្រែប្រួលទេពីប្រហែលឆ្នាំមុនមកដល់ឥឡូវនេះប្រែប្រួលរបៀបម៉េចទៅអញ្ចឹងយើងពេលខ្លះយើងរំលឹកអនុស្សាវរីយ៍ជាមួយគ្នាគណៈគ្រប់គ្រងថ្មីអញ្ជើញមកខែ3បានតែប្រហែលថ្ងៃផ្ទុះ COVID បាទចង់ជួបមុខបងប្អូនមែនទែនទាំងអស់គ្នាបាទប៉ុន្តែមិនដឹងជួបយ៉ាងម៉េចព្រោះ COVID បានផ្ដាច់ទំនាក់ទំនងរបស់យើងបាទទំនាក់ទំនងរបស់យើងក៏ប៉ុន្តែគណៈគ្រប់គ្រងគឺនៅតែមានការបញ្ញាចិត្តខ្ពស់គឺថាត្រូវតែជួបមុខបងប្អូនតតែបានតាមរយៈបច្ចេកវិទ្យាថ្មីទាំងអស់គ្នាថ្មីទាំងបងប្អូនថ្មីទាំងគណៈគ្រប់គ្រងថ្មីទាំងគ្រូបង្រៀនជាពិសេសបច្ចេកទេសក្នុងការបង្រៀនអនឡាញមិនអញ្ចឹងបងប្អូនណាមកដល់លើតែគេថាំងបរៀន Zoom ស្អីគេ Zoom នោះអញ្ចឹង Google Meet អីចឹងហូរហែមកអញ្ចឹងវាធ្វើឲ្យយើងមានការភ្ញាក់ផ្អើលក៏ប៉ុន្តែក៏សូមអរគុណដែរដោយសារគណៈគ្រប់គ្រងសាស្ត្រាចារ្យនិស្សិតសហការគ្នាបានល្អណាស់បាទខ្ញុំសូមកោតសរសើរយ៉ាងខ្ពស់គឺថាយើងប្រឹងប្រែងរៀនទាំងអស់គ្នាប្រឹងប្រែងចាប់យកបច្ចេកវិទ្យាថ្មីនឹងទាំងអស់គ្នាហើយយើងគិតថាមិនមែនជាឧបសគ្គ សម្រាប់ការរៀននេះទើបយើងបន្តការរៀនរហូតមកដល់សប្តាហ៍ថ្ងៃអញ្ចឹងក្នុងស្ថានភាពនេះយើងនៅតែបន្តប្រើ blended learning មានន័យថាបច្ចេកវិទ្យាយើងនៅតែមិនបោះបង់ចោលទោះបីជា COVID នឹងនៅស្ថានភាពបែបនេះឬក៏បាត់ក៏ដោយក៏យើងនៅតែប្រើបច្ចេកវិទ្យានឹងបាទព្រោះវាផ្ដល់ឲ្យយើងនៅផលចំណេញច្រើនណាស់ហើយបន្តិចទៀតនេះយើងនឹងមាននិស្សិតអន្តរជាតិមកទីនេះទៀតបាទរៀនកម្មវិធីBachelor Degree in SME Management ហើយនឹងយើងនឹងខែ3យើងនឹងបើកថ្នាក់ Master Degree បាទដែលមាននិស្សិតមកពីក្រៅដែរអញ្ចឹងពេលខ្លះយើងរៀនអនឡាញខ្លះយើងរៀននៅក្នុងថ្នាក់ខ្លះអញ្ចឹងយើងធ្វើ blended learning បាទអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំសូមធ្វើបច្ចុប្បន្នភាពជូនបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាថា LC Business School គឺមាន commitment ផ្ដល់ជូននៅ program តែមួយគត់ unique តាំងពី Bachelor Degree រហូតដល់ Master Degree unique ហើយបងប្អូនចាំមើលមួយឆ្នាំពីរឆ្នាំទៀតមានការប្លែកខ្លាំងមែនទែនដោយសារចក្ខុវិស័យបេសកកម្មគោលបំណងគឺត្រូវបានគ្រប់គ្រងយ៉ាងពេញលេញពីប្រធានបតពីសមាជិកបតក៏ដូចជាស្ថាបនិកបាទអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំសូមបងប្អូនសោកឈរស្វាគមន៍បាទស្វាគមន៍បាទសូមអរគុណសូមនិមន្តបដិជននេះបាទជាបឋមខ្ញុំបកណាសូមថ្វាយបង្គំព្រះអង្គបដិជគុណបណ្ឌិតគូសុភាពសូមគោរពស្កត Denson សូមគោរពដុកទ័រ Susan Hagaden ហើយនិងស្ថាបនិក LC Business School លោកគ្រូខឹមសុថេងហើយនិងនាយកសូមសារជាថ្មីសូមជម្រាបសួរបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាហើយសូមអរគុណជាអនេកកបការដែលបានរងចាំទន្ទឹងពេលវេលារងចាំវាគ្មិនបាទអញ្ចឹងសូមអនុញ្ញាតខ្ញុំធ្វើ open remark ជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសបន្តិចបាទសូមអភ័យទោសបាទ Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap, Mr. Scott Nissen, Dr. Susan Hagaden, distinguished guests, faculty, staff, and beloved students. It's my honor to welcome you to LC Business School and this special lecture organized by SME Department, the 7th as a leader. At this time, I would like to invite you to stand for the national anthem. Please stand up. Thank you. Please be seated. LC Business School was recognized in Prakash number 2791 by Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports, dated 31st July 2013, for provision of SME Management undergraduate program. In early 2020, Mr. Hambonaren, the school director, introduced an international program model of SME management with thorough discussions with a board of directors and experts. The school's commitment is to promote three core values: entrepreneurship, innovation, and humanity, and to become one of the international higher education institute in Cambodia. Ever since, Khmer-based SME program has been transformed to an English-based one, which responds to the actual demand in local and regional and global markets. The program is quite unique for a number of special features, namely English as a medium of instruction, expert professors and experts, overseas trips, business model competition, project-based learning approaches, academic and professional exchange programs at partner institutes in Asia, Europe, America, and Africa. Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator tonight, the first speaker, Dr. Suzanne Hangaden. Please. Yeah. And okay, and then Dr. Kou Sopheap and Mr. Scott Dennison. Okay, before I hand over the program to our facilitator, let me introduce. Dr. Suzanne is the Deputy Director of LC Business School and the Dean of its Leadership Academy of SMEs. She has more than 25 years experience as a leadership business consultant to organizations in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and as a professor of leadership in Cambodian. Now I would like to give floor to you, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Ratana. I'd like to pay my deepest respect to Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap, Mr. Scott Nason, Mr. Kin Kang, our director, Mr. Hambonaren, and good evening to all of our distinguished guests and dear students tonight. We're very lucky this evening to have on just one stage, not one, but two Cambodian idols. The Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap and Mr. Scott Nason, Director of the Cambodian Children's Fund. And we'd like to thank you deeply for giving your time to us this evening. So before we begin the lecture portion of the program, Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap is going to offer a Dharma blessing.
Yantao Bodhiya Mole Sakyanang Nantavatano Evang Twang Vijayo Hao Hejiya Sujiya Mangale Aparajita Palanke Se Patavipau Hare Abhiseke Sapapothiyanang Akapatao Pamau Tatasunakhatang Sumangkalang Supaphiatang Sahothetang Sukhinao Sumohotao Chasiyatang Pramachare Supatyakinang Kayakamang Vyajakamang Patyakhinang Manokamang Panithite Patyakhina Nikatva Nalapantate Patyakhene.
Thank you, Venerable. Before we go on to hear from our two special guests, I'd like to provide a little bit of the history and context about the theory of the servant as leader. I think it's fair to say that throughout our history, the ability to care about each other and to serve each other has been the key to being able to survive since humans began to walk the earth. And if we were to look at every major religion in the world today, we would discover that the value that they all share is the idea of providing service to others. During the Industrial Revolution, beginning in the late 18th century, the world began to leave behind this idea of survival through community and became increasingly oriented towards the idea of survival through competition. During that time, rich, educated businessmen dominated while poorer, less educated workers served their demands. The first modern leadership theories that emerged during that time reflect that reality. In 1970, Robert K. Greenleaf, a senior executive with a major corporation in the United States, introduced a radical concept when he wrote the essay, The Servant as Leader. Have the first slide. Okay. So, servant, leader, these are not concepts that we normally join together. But Mr. Greenleaf had an intuitive sense that if someone were both a servant and a leader, that person would be able to motivate people better, increase trust within organizations, and as a result, improve organizational performance. This philosophy of leadership has proven to be so attractive and useful that it has influenced virtually every leadership theory that has been written since the time of his first essay. Greenleaf's concept is best represented in the following quote. He wrote, "The servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from one who is a leader first, perhaps because of a need to assuage, or in other words, to satisfy, an unusual power drive or to acquire material possessions. The leader first and the servant first are two extreme types. The difference manifests, or in other words, shows itself in the care taken by the servant first to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are being served. Thus, Robert Greenleaf challenges us on two levels. First, as I think we all know, leadership has become a very popular topic. Just this afternoon, I Googled the word leadership, and 2.7 billion hits came back. And Amazon.com has more than 60,000 books that have the word leadership in their title. So the challenge that Greenleaf gives to us is that in order to become leaders, we should do it not just for the sake of being called a leader, but because we're called to serve some cause that is greater than ourselves. And it's this greater cause that motivates us to take on the responsibility, often the burdens, and even the sacrifices that are involved in being a leader. Second, Greenleaf writes that the most important role of the servant leader is not to command and control others, but to anticipate and serve the needs of others in such a way that they can become their best selves. So what do these servant leaders look like? They are aware of their own values and of their own competencies as well as their weaknesses. They have big dreams of a better world, and they're willing to take on all challenges in order to achieve those dreams. They're excellent listeners, and they strive to understand others, especially those who have different opinions than they have. They're skilled at deciding priorities, and they know when to step back and just let go. Perhaps most importantly, they accept themselves and others as naturally flawed human beings. They always welcome the person, even if they would like to change the performance of that person. Through these processes, other people learn to serve, expanding the community of servant leaders so that we begin to return to a natural human state of survival through caring and service. So, does servant leadership just sound like a nice idea, or does it actually work? During the past 15 years or so, there's been a lot of research on this topic, and what the researchers are finding is that yes, servant leadership works. Servant leaders create environments that are based in shared vision, trust, affection, and appreciation, leading to a sense of belonging and commitment to the organization. And it is this strong commitment to a vision that is shared by a community of people who care about one another that appears to lead to improved organizational performance. John C. Maxwell, another leadership theorist, provides guidance to those who wish, as he puts it, to develop the heart of a servant. And these are the 5 points that he makes. We should always meet people where they are without thinking about our position or theirs. We should always encourage everyone around us to be successful, not just the people that we like. We should learn to see things through another person's eyes, especially when it's someone who we don't agree with. We should find something positive to say to the members of our team every day to help motivate and inspire them. And finally, we should measure our success by the extent to which others are able to succeed. In closing, Robert Greenleaf reminds us that the forces for good and evil in the world are propelled by the thoughts, attitudes, and actions of individual beings. Thus, it is a choice that each of us can make or not to live our lives to make the world a better place. Thank you. Okay. Our next speaker is Mr. Scott Neeson. Mr. Neeson is a former Hollywood movie executive and the founder and current executive director of the Cambodian Children's Fund. This organization has transformed the neighborhood surrounding the former Stung Min Che garbage dump. I'm not going to say too much more about Mr. Neeson because he has come here to share his story with you. However, I would like to say that Mr. Neeson is very much beloved in this country for his work as a practicing servant leader among the poorest of the poor. Mr. Neeson will speak this evening on the topic, What Service Means to Me.
Chiếm số cái nhóm chúng Scott Neeson cái nhóm protein on mỗi tí của mặt Campuchia. That's all the Khmer I know, unfortunately. I'd like to acknowledge my mentor, my very good friend, Venerable Kou Sopheap. He's been a wonderful inspiration over the years. Now, many of you may know my journey. I was working in Hollywood. I was president of a film studio. Do we have the video? I'd like to show a short video which shortcuts the story. It explains the circumstances of how I got here.
Karma means action. So, real effect come only through action. You should ask him. He sacrificed his sort of comfortable life in America. He spent more time in Cambodia, where poor people there. And you yourself, you see, occasionally may miss your sort of comfortable life in there.
Yes.
So, but then, through experience, you feel working, serving these poor people, then you really get the meaning of our life.
He was the marketing mastermind behind some of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. Scott Neeson lived the life that some dream of.
It was a great life because I was traveling first class to Paris, Germany, Tokyo, into South America. Had a beautiful house in the hills of Brentwood, and it was a nice life. Had a boat in the harbour and a Porsche SUV, and I loved it.
But the script changed for Scott on a backpacking trip to Cambodia.
I was traumatised myself after the first day there.
It spans 8 football fields. It is 100 feet deep. Its stench carries for miles. And it is where the poorest of Cambodians' desperately poor children eke out a living. This massive garbage dump in Cambodia's capital city offers up scraps of glass and metal these children sell for less than $1 a day.
The children are here because they have nowhere else to go. Many of them have lost their parents, and this dump site is a lifeline for their survival.
Former Hollywood executive Scott Neeson was on vacation when he saw the dump for the first time.
It shattered my world. It was like walking from the best parts of West Los Angeles, where I was living, to the apocalypse.
Scott's solution, the Cambodian Children's Fund, a safe haven for children. And he did the unthinkable. He left his glamorous life to live in Cambodia.
Scott!
Yes. Oh, choo.
There's that wonderful moment when you see a child that you found that was in the most appalling circumstances, that had no light in their eyes, and you remember back to the moment you found them. Wow, I remember when I found this girl. You can't fathom this child once had no light there, because of just so much joy, so much hope, so much happiness. There's a real honour in being able to not only witness it, to be part of it. That's a real wonderment. People want to matter again. They want to be part of something. They want to be seen as humans, not as a sum total of what they consume. If we can get back to those values, family, love and compassion.
So that explains the circumstances of how I came to be here, but it doesn't really tell the personal story. And what really fascinates me is, as you can see, my move from Hollywood to Cambodia, it created a lot of excitement, a lot of media attention in America at the time. And I now understand why, but at the time I was perplexed because I was moving here for a very personal reason, and the biggest obstacle that I'd overcome, the most remarkable thing in my life was that I had become successful in business. You know, I grew up in quite a poor family in Australia. I wasn't able to finish high school, so I left school when I was 16 years old, and I worked in construction. I milked cows. I did anything I could in order to earn money. I was lucky in that I was given a job working in some movie cinemas. I was running the projectors upstairs. I was making popcorn downstairs and selling tickets. And through a remarkable series of coincidences and a lot of luck, there was a lot of luck involved, I worked my way up through the corporate ladder over to Sydney. From there, I moved to Los Angeles, and I was made president of 20th Century Fox shortly after that. Now, for me, that was the most amazing thing, having come from a background where no one expects anything from you, where you don't really have much of a dream. It's more about getting in money to pay the rent, to try and help the family. There's that sense of immediacy. So when I found myself running a film studio, and we had a terrific run. We had Titanic, X-Men, Independence Day, Ice Age, and I felt like I was the top of the king of the world. It was a very, very exciting time. Now with that, of course, came all the material goods, and I was very much into my consumerism. I had fancy cars, sports cars. I had a beautiful boat in the harbour. I bought a very large home in Beverly Hills. It was everything there. It was things that I marveled at, I was fascinated by, because for me it was something of a dream to think I had all this. But there comes a point where, and this is something the Dalai Lama spoke of, you become satiated. You become so full of these material things that your soul and your spirit wants something outside. The difficulty is coming to the awareness that your soul, your spirit is at a standstill. Because even with a fancy sports car and a boat and a nice house, you would think that, what else do you need? Well, you know, I think you know the answer to that. You want to get a better iPhone. You want to get the more recent phone to keep up with your friends. You want to get a bigger car, a nicer house. You want to get a bigger boat than the people who live down the road from you. And I really had bought into that. It was like being a mouse on one of those spinning wheels where you're running all the time but not going anywhere. That's, in retrospect, how my life had become. Now, back then it was okay, because the whole world I lived in, it was filled with mice on running wheels all along. People who worked for me, people who were above me, my bosses, everyone else in the film industry, they were all doing the same. Everyone trying to outstrip each other with new car, better phone, better sound system. In some places, people had their own private jets, and everyone was spinning away there. And it's very easy to do, and it's easier to do these days with likes of social media, where you can reinvent yourself, where you can show off your latest iPhone 12 or wherever that these days. But there was always this bit of an emptiness inside that I couldn't quite put my finger on. So after 10 years at Fox, it was a very successful run. We'd started off When I arrived, we were number 5 out of 5 studios. When I left, we were number one studio in the world. And so I was considered very valuable. And Sony Pictures offered me a job to run their studios. They were having all sorts of problems. They had Spider-Man releasing in about 6 months' time. And so they offered me even more money to go over there. And I thought more money was a good thing. I decided that I needed some time out before I started at Sony, signed the contract, and went on my trip through Asia. And the idea was to visit all the Buddhist monuments from Borobudur in Indonesia, of course Angkor Wat, through Thailand, and eventually go up through India. I felt like this would give me some clarity, give me a bit of peace before I got back onto the consumer spinning wheel again. Now, when I was in Phnom Penh, I met up with a friend's friend, and I was always curious about what poverty looked like. Having grown up, or having spent, 10 years in Hollywood, I didn't really trust charities. I never gave to charities, and yeah, it's a very shameful thing these days. I was earning so much money, and I did not give my money to charity. And I hope that you'll identify with some of the reasons why. First of all, even though I was earning a lot of money, people were earning more money than me. So I would say, why should I give the money? He's got a Rolls Royce, he's got a Bentley, he's got a bigger house than me. There was always an incentive to look upwards at what other people were not doing, as opposed to look at myself and what I could be doing. The other thing, which was a valid point, I didn't trust too many charities. I've read many stories about people who took very large salaries, money had been embezzled, taken from the charity. Maybe only 50% of the money went to the charity, the rest was taken along the way. And then, of course, the existential reason, and that's, I pay my taxes, the government should be helping, big corporations should be helping. Now, every time we do that, we disempower ourselves just a little bit more. A lot of people comment on Facebook or comment to me personally. They say, I wish I could do what you have done. And I understand the intention, but every time you say that, you take your own power, you disempower yourself. You are saying, I don't have the ability to help. It is not within my scope to help. And it is. Even if it's only a tiny, tiny piece, you can help. So the journey all began in Phnom Penh. I mentioned to a friend, are there any areas where there is enormous poverty, squalor, where there are no organizations, no NGOs helping? He gave me an address, and it was, of course, Sting Ming Che. I went down there with a translator, not knowing where I was going, stepped out of the car, stepped out of this taxi, and I've never seen a more distressing, squalid sight. 11 hectares of garbage, and across it were roughly 1,500 children going through garbage, looking for food, recyclables, enough to get food that day, and in many cases they'd be sleeping on the landfill, waking up the next day and doing it all over again. And it was so hard to comprehend. I couldn't bring myself to walk away. the easiest thing would be to have got back into the taxi, worked out a way to send some money to a charity here. But it didn't feel authentic, it didn't feel real. And at that moment, there was a young child walking by, very, very small. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl. They had all their clothing on. All I could see was the eyes. One was the heat on the landfill is terrible because the ground burns, garbage creates methane, methane burns, and the ground below was burning the whole time. And of course, if you don't have a place to live, there's no place to leave clothes. So you have to carry with you everything you own. So I stopped and I did something that was very counterintuitive, something I wouldn't normally do. And I squatted down to eye level with this child and with the translator, asked her why she was there, what she was doing. And it turned out she was there with her mother, living on the landfill. Her little sister was critically ill. She had tuberculosis. And the good thing about being in the corporate world is you learn to solve problems. I knew nothing about children, and I never married, no children. I knew nothing about charities, philanthropy. I didn't know anything about Cambodia back then, but I knew how to solve the immediate problems. So I got hold of the mother, got hold of the little sister who was sick, and over the next hour, and with the translator, they found a place to rent. My friend, who was the translator, would be paying the rent, delivering food, and a small stipend to the family when I went back to Hollywood to my Sony Pictures deal. And that was it. It was a tiny amount of money, and it took an hour and a half, and I went back to the hotel. It was, of course, the hotel was Raffles, as you'd expect, staying at Raffles, but it really was one of the most turbulent nights. I couldn't sleep, I kept spinning over, and it was because I didn't realize, I'd never in my whole life realized that I had the capacity to help a child. And it's not just giving them a drink, it's not just being able to give them some money, clothes. I understood and I realized that I had changed this child's life forever, from living on a garbage dump to going to school every day. I'd got this sister into a hospital when chances are she was going to die. And I'd never in my wildest dreams thought this was within my capacity. That rocked my world terribly. And it was an existential crisis, because if I can affect one family so profoundly, well, why can't I help 2 or 3 or 4? So next day I went back to Stingminche landfill and found 2 more children, did the same, found the parents or guardians or grandparents, made sure they had a place to rent, make sure they'd get registered in public school, make sure there's someone here to follow up to make sure they're still in school, and so it went on. I think it was after 3 weeks here, there were 14 children, I think 9 families who were living in rental houses, and I was feeling very good about that. The problem I had, and it was a wonderful problem, was that it was like I had been infected with some mosquito bite. I was so sure that I was meant to be here. I was meant to help. I started to get ideas of how many children we could take off the landfill. I wanted to hire people, I wanted to rent buildings, but I didn't. I'd spent in total, I'd spent a total of 25 years in the film business. I was concerned that I would be acting impulsively, that I would stay there end my Hollywood career. People would think I was crazy, and I'd regret it after 3 or 4 months. So I made myself a promise. I made a very private promise to myself that I wouldn't do anything drastic for 12 months from that day, for 12 months. I would work at Sony Pictures, and I would do my best in the job. Whatever income I had that I could send to Cambodia, I would. Otherwise, this would be my path. I'd stay in Hollywood. And it made sense because at that time, sending all the money I could to the families here made more sense than moving here. But in the next 12 months, I cheated. I sold my houseboat, I sold my cars, I moved into this tiny little apartment and counted down the months and the days until I could resign and move here. Even worse, and this upset my bosses at Sony, I made 11 trips back to Cambodia in that 12-month period, and each time brought in more children, rented buildings, brought on staff, brought on teachers. And that was the beginning of Cambodian Children's Fund. I eventually made through the 12 months. I resigned, moved here in December 2004. Now, today we have, my goodness, we have 2,000 children in school. We have a terrific education system. 70% of the first students that came in have gone through university. In fact, the girl I found on my very first day recently graduated with a degree in finance and management. She went to NUM, and obviously I couldn't be more proud. And the little sister who went to hospital starts university next month. Now, it really wasn't easy. It was very hard work. You know, you give up a lot, there's no question about it. You find yourself full of love, compassion, you have a purpose for getting up every day, but it's not easy. The single most important thing, though, is to take that first step. We've got, as I say, we've got 300 children through university. We've built 600 homes. A medical clinic treats about 30,000 people a year at no cost, including very good doctors, medicine. We have daycare. We have so many grandmothers under our care right now, looking after foster children, helping with the wisdom, teaching the Buddhist values. It's this very complex organization. However, I never quite seriously, I never had a vision of what CCF would look like. Every day, every decision, every program was determined by what the needs were that day. Getting a child into school, I found out, was easy compared to keeping the child in school. The parents need an income, the younger siblings need to be taken care of, the child may have a grandparent who's sick, and so these programs kept on evolving in order to keep the child in school. But it was, as I say, it was that one first step that started this whole thing rolling. You know, there's a great saying that everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And that sort of explained for me the journey itself. It was taking that one step, finally moving here, and for me, I'm in my own personal heaven. It's challenging, it's exhausting, but my goodness, it's a wonderful thing. You know, now as I've got older too, and of recent, I've begun to see what my legacy will be. And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, when I'm well and truly gone, moved on to the next life, I know now that the children that have gone through university, they're already starting their own families. Those children will never know poverty, they'll never know squalor. They'll have good, caring, compassionate lives. And of course, by the time there are grandchildren, it'll all be forgotten. no one will remember the days of the garbage of the landfill. They won't know what their parents or grandparents had to endure, what they had to achieve in order for them to have a good life. And I think that is the meaning of life, is to create something that outlasts you. You know, they're saying that the meaning of life is to plant a tree under whose shade you will never sit. And that for me was the meaning. That's become the journey. And I know that when I'm on my deathbed in the years to come, there'll be no regrets. There'll be no regrets. I'll have 1,000 memories and no regrets about the decisions I made. So that's it for the moment. There'll be a question and answer. Thank you for your attention, Akwon, and I'll pass it back.
Well, I have one word of response to that, which is wow. Thank you, Scott, for your comments. And there are so many gems of wisdom there to take away. In terms, you know, a few that I'd like to emphasize is what he said about how we may not be able to do something huge, but each of us has the ability to do something. He talked about how important it is to be a problem solver. And I think this, for our many students in the audience, this will be very important to you. You may find yourself in a situation like Mr. Neeson did, that's completely unfamiliar. But as long as you become a good problem solver, you'll be able to handle that new situation. You know, he talked about in the video going back to values of family and love, which I think is very similar to what Robert Greenleaf said about getting back to our natural human nature of living for community instead of surviving through competition. And there was so much more in what you said that I'll just stop there rather than give another speech. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our other special speaker, Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap. Venerable has been a monk for a very long time now, since he was quite young. And throughout his monkhood, he's been a very serious student of Buddhism, and particularly the leadership that the Buddha taught us, as well as the Pali language and meditation practice. He's become a source of spiritual inspiration for, I think, literally tens of thousands of people around the world, if not more. And he's through his public ministries, and he's also very much appreciated for the practical life advice that he's able to provide, as well as his wonderful sense of humor. So Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap will now share his wisdom about the positive mental attitude that it takes to become a good leader, a servant leader.
Som Masaka Jumpuh Paratana Trai Put Puthon and Pasang Langkum Kuncha. Respected Scott, happy to be with you here today. Respected Dr. Susan, I just told Scott that I came here to listen to him, not to talk. Wonderful story, life journey. I think the real servant leader is here. Give him a big applause. he sacrifices all his wealth and position to come to serve. That is an act of compassion and wisdom to support our Cambodian children to pursue their goal in life, to get their education. I think that I'm not to go to talk in English. Scott already did it. I will switch to Khmer. So I think the story of Scott. Oh, I'm sorry, talking in English. The story of Scott shows us the inner quality, the compassion, the empathy. I think I've heard from one of our distinguished from Kuntabupa Hospital. You feel someone suffering. You heard their voice and you are willing to help. I think that I start that kind of feeling when I was at the university, and I talked to some university students who have a problem with their mental health. They are frustrated. They could not sleep at night. They get depressed.ជំងឺអីគេ depression ហ្នឹងឥឡូវគេហៅវាមានអ្នកកើតទុកមុខស្រស់សបោ technical word for that is mass depression. So outside you are so happy, excited, but inside you are sad. Hay ដល់ពេលឃើញបងប្អូន struggle with their mental state. I think that the Dharma could help them in some way. So that's why I just start little by little, short words, short video. I think that maybe some of you already, some of you watched the video, right? ថប់មើលទាំងអស់គ្នា ថប់មើលនៅក្នុង Facebook ហើយ YouTube មើលអ្នកណាខ្លះធ្លាប់មើលនៅក្នុង Facebook ហើយជា YouTube. Okay, thank you. ពេលដែលឃើញគេបានសប្បាយចិត្តណាយើងសប្បាយចិត្តដែរអ្នកខ្លះ condition ខ្លះគាត់ចង់សម្លាប់ខ្លួនញោមស្រីម្នាក់នោះគាត់មានវិបត្តិរឿងប្តីគាត់រត់ចោលហើយធ្វើបាបចិត្តគាត់ឲ្យគាត់នៅម្នាក់ឯងទុកកូនចោលគាត់គិតស្មុកទៅគាត់ get depressed and want to commit suicide គាត់ឡើងទៅលើប្រងចងកអានឹងដល់វគ្គឃើញសសរកន្លងឲ្យខ្ញុំដាក់ហ្នឹងហើយប៉ុន្តែដល់ពេលរៀបនឹងចងកហ្នឹងគាត់ឃើញលោកឡាយធរចឹងគាត់ថាំងមុននឹងងាប់ស្ដាប់លោកនេះសិនចុះចឹងក៏បើក Facebook មើលទៅចំពេលដែលនិយាយអំពីសេចក្តីទុក្ខកើតពីការជាប់ជំពាក់ហួងហែងប្រកាន់ចង់ឲ្យរឿងហ្នឹងតាមចិត្តដែលចង់ប្រាថ្នាយល់ទេទាំងអស់យល់ណាដល់ថ្ងៃចង់ឲ្យស្វាមីហ្នឹងមកអញ្ចេះមកចង់ឲ្យរឿងហ្នឹងវាអញ្ចេះទៅមិនបានមិនតាមចិត្តខ្ញុំហើយបើក្នុងធម៌លោកហៅពេមតោជាយតេសោកោសេចក្តីសោកកើតពីសេចក្តីស្រឡាញ់យ៉ាងណានឹងរៀងប្រជ្រះជាមួយញាតិញោមមានគ្រួសារបន្តិចបើញាតិញោម Ôn này bay bạ song xa nâng trời rồi nè. Hay ban quạt bạn đạp tới quạt vô quạt tầm lẹ than nâng ấy mình nuôi việc khâu kia chẳng dương trong này kia là bên bên mình bật con ta kia là tam dương ấy quạt sum rùa chặt màu vĩnh quạt cho máu ao cồn chẳng suicide nâng ở bàn sầm rải vậy nâng tôi tha bàn ảo vạt nâng chui quạt sum rùa plei chặt quạt ở quạt che rùa nơi chỉ mùi nâng cá bịch so life is ups and downs. So you need to be able to face it, to solve it, and to move on. Don't get stuck with it. That is life. I sometimes have a low time too. I'm not as happy as now sometimes. I get mad or sad. But sad is just a visitor. It comes and go and let it go, okay? Chẳng feeling sad nó với mau lên dương một đòn ấy phần cùng khoát ở viên nơi chùa mùa dương á, okay? Thọp mưa tóc ta Frozen ấy. Have you ever watched Frozen? And there's a song in there. I don't know who produced that cartoon, but that is a song. Let it go, right? Và thà bạ chặt pi thế đạp nung tới giờ let it go rồi. This is a story. A broken young man went to the temple, very frustrated and broken heart. He approached to my room and knee down and hugged my knee. Help me, help me. And I asked, what happened to you? I'm broken heart. And what happened? He said her mother didn't want him. He's poor. He's not highly educated. And the mother of the girl said no more contact with him. He was broken inside. And I asked him, can you find any way to convince the mother of the girl to accept you? He said, no way. And I said, okay, if there is no way, I have a mantra for you, okay? Miền muôn akum to help you. And then ma có phép có tha lấy bụp ôn plei dây convince mà đai khang sấy hơi dây hơi chơi mà miền muôn akum môi bạc cài mà ai chui bàn ở sốt mòn pe nan nó có thắc pe đạp bỏng tới thu plei pe bật bỏng tới mau vinh rồi. Chắc ta lấy chơi bữa pe nan nó kia ôn anh sốt mòn à men bà anh tê she's not mine, that is my mantra. Why you worry? You have no way to convince the girl, the mother's girl. So, bởi phía xa bà lấy quân chắc, phía xa bà lấy tha xa nẹ mê hào tệ thà niên nâng mình men rồi bác anh tì. Ok, nâng chia thì ho môi đèn trong cái đá mà phiếp sở bái chất nơi phê đại kê bàn thu sở bài. Hay mình men từ rương chẳng hay rương và bạ chất hướng khát họ si business ấy rư có bắt bằng ở phục mà đai chỉ tì sở lánh tơ vọt đây na phê men túc cái tơ vọt đây cái mà chương 3 chương 4 của cái tơ vọt đây. Hãy bông trắng côn khôi của người dân tới nhà ông bọt này. Này dương này nè tụi tôi rong cru hết con cha. But I am very happy to do my small part to support the people who face the challenge in life, and I'm happy to see them feel better. Some there's an example, one family lose millions of dollars, and then they feel so frustrated after losing that money. They came to the temple, they talked to me, and the wife said that I am okay. I always teach myself that life is always ups and down like that. Even though I get millions of dollars, I feel okay, and I lose, that's okay for me. But the problem is with my husband. He's so depressed. And I told the husband that, okay, you need to learn from your wife, okay? So accept that. Life is always ups and downs. Face it and move on, okay? I think that's it for me from today. Thank you very much. My short one.
Okay, thank you so much, Venerable Sopheap. At this point, we're going to open up for questions and answers. So you can ask questions of Venerable Sopheap, Mr. Neeson, myself, and looks like we have someone who will bring you a microphone. So if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Okay, so please let us know your name and who your question is for.
Good evening, everybody, and our participants and our guest speakers, Mr. Scott Mason and Padachikun Kou Sopheap and Miss. Today I have the great honor to join this conference, and my question is trained to Mr. Scott because I want to know something about you. I know you little, so little, and now I want to know about you deeply. My first question is that I want to know about your heart because I see your big heart inside you. I want to know first is that why take you to come to Cambodia and you have the unconditional love with the Cambodian people. And I think in our world, we have a lot of kids like Cambodian kids, but why you choose to come to Cambodia and serve the kids Cambodians? Thank you.
Well, it's a good question. It's one I get asked quite a bit. I did not have a big heart before I came to Cambodia. It was smaller than most. It grew, the more I came to Cambodia, the more children I helped, the more grandmothers I was able to help. Your heart grows. It's like working a muscle. It gets driven, it gets enhanced. It feels so good to be able to help someone. And it continues to grow, it continues to evolve. For me now, one of the greatest joys is to be able to help someone without them ever knowing that it was me or ever understanding who helped, how they helped. It continues to grow. It's not something you're born with, and it's certainly not something you're stuck with your whole life. Why Cambodia? I fell in love with the people in Sting Ming Che. Were the first people that I felt so much care, compassion for. There's such a sense of warmth and family here, despite the terrible history. I'm not quite sure if it's if I was in past lifetimes I was in Cambodia, there was such a draw, not just to the children, but to the parents, and the willingness of everyone here, from the young to the very old, to embrace what I wanted to do, to help me achieve those goals. There's grandmothers there who really helped me out in the first days. There are children who taught me so much about compassion and giving. Down at the Sting Min Che landfill, they taught me far more than I've been able to give back to them. I don't have a distinct answer, but Cambodia, it was meant to be. You know, I did have a plan initially that once I set up the charity here, I would do the same in other countries, but I'm not going anywhere now. I've decided that I've done my piece for my life, and Cambodia is home now.
Okay, that was a great question and answer. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Okay, up here in the front, Peng Heng.
Kena som namaskar គុណចាស់គណៈមានសំណួរមួយចង់ពិតប្រកេនគុណចាស់ដែលគណៈអាចថាស្ដាប់ធម៌ទៅជួបជាមួយនឹងព្រះអង្គគ្រូដែលលោកទេសនាដែលស្ដីពីជួយខ្លួនឯងដោយមិនខ្វល់ពីអ្នកដទៃគឺជារឿងមួយគឺជាមនុស្សម្នាក់ដែលមិនល្អហើយមួយទៀតជួយអ្នកដទៃច្រើនដោយមិនគិតពីប្រយោជន៍ផ្ទាល់ខ្លួនរបស់ខ្លួនឯងហ្នឹងក៏ជាមនុស្សមិនល្អដែរអញ្ចឹងតើនៅក្នុងវិធីទាំងពីរហ្នឹងតើខ្ញុំប្រកាសណានឹងមនុស្សទាំងអស់អាចថាមនុស្សទាំងអស់គួរប្រកាន់នៅផ្លូវកណ្ដាលយ៉ាងដូចម្ដេចទើបប្រសើរកណាសូមអរគុណ
គេអរគុណបងអូនចឹងនៅក្នុងពុទ្ធសាសនាសម្ដែងពីការស្រឡាញ់មាន3កម្រិត so there are 3 level of love or compassion in Buddhism. The first level is what we call self love. You need to be able to love yourself. Sometimes somebody just feel bad about themselves and you create the suffering for yourself. ចឹងដំបូងឡើយyou need to be strong, to stand up strong like Scott in order to help others. But it's not a selfish love, okay? But you need to be strong in terms of your education, in terms of your finance, in terms of your relation. You need to be strong. And you need to be able to have a positive feeling toward yourself. It's បើភាសាធម៌លោកហៅអត្តដ្ឋចរិយាការប្រព្រឹត្តជាប្រយោជន៍សម្រាប់ខ្លួនឯងដោយព្រះពុទ្ធព្រះអង្គត្រាស់ដឹងសិនមុននឹងជួយគេឲ្យត្រាស់ដឹងបាននឹងលោកហៅថាអត្តដ្ឋចរិយាយ៉ាងហ្នឹងណា The second level of love is the family love. You treat your family members well. ដោយព្រះពុទ្ធព្រះអង្គត្រាស់ដឹងហើយព្រះអង្គទៅជួយសង្គ្រោះញាតិរបស់ព្រះអង្គវិញ យើងក៏យើងទាំងអស់គ្នាយើងមាន responsibility ត្រូវជួយ family. But the third level of love, I think that Scott is already did and have done so far what we call a humanity love. បើភាសាធម៌លោកហៅថាលោកតចរិយាមានន័យថាប្រព្រឹត្តជាប្រយោជន៍សម្រាប់មនុស្សលោកទូទៅ so អញ្ចឹងយើង let it go អញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងធម៌ព្រះអង្គលើកទឹកចិត្តឲ្យយើង ជួយសង្គ្រោះអ្នកដទៃហើយក៏មិនត្រូវបោះបង់ខ្លួនឯងដោយការប្រព្រឹត្តអាក្រក់ដែរទៅលួចគេដើម្បីមកជួយអ្នកដទៃអាហ្នឹងព្រះអង្គអត់សរសើរទេសុខចិត្តលះបង់គុណធម៌ខ្លួនឯងដើម្បីឲ្យអ្នកដទៃអាហ្នឹងព្រះអង្គអត់សរសើរទេព្រះអង្គថាឲ្យយើងរក្សា maintain your character and at the same time you build up your capacity to help others ចឹងណាអូនយល់ហើយណាអូខេអរគុណច្រើន
Okay, up here in the front, please.
Kana somថ្វាយបង្គំគុណចាស់សំណួរកណាពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងទៅលើជីវភាពរស់នៅស្រុកស្រែជនបទគុណចាស់ពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងបុណ្យហើយនឹងបាបកណាមានមន្ទិលសង្ស័យយូរហើយលក្ខណៈយើងសម្រាប់សត្វយកមកបរិភោគដូចជាស្រុកស្រែជនបទអីគាត់ទៅរមហូបរអីមកដើម្បីសម្រាប់ធ្វើជាមហូបធ្វើជាអីចឹងណាគុណចាស់តើវាមានផលបាបកម្រិតណាដែរគុណចាស់នេះអរគុណ
សំណួរនេះរងពិបាកឆ្លើយបន្តិច He asked about maybe fishing for surviving. You kill the animals, but then for survival. Does that a sin? អានេះខ្មៅឆ្លើយតាមធម៌ចឹងណាអូនណាអូខេតែចាំធម៌ថាទាំងមនុស្សទាំងសត្វសិតតែប្រាថ្នាចង់រស់ដូចគ្នាយ៉ាងណាសត្វក៏គ្នារត់ប្រះយោដែរនៅពេលដែលយើងសម្លាប់គ្នាចឹងបើសម្រាប់បុថុជនធម្មតាអានឹងទៅតាមដំណើរហ្នឹងឯងប៉ុន្តែបើសម្រាប់ព្រះអរិយៈលោកលះបង់លោកសម្លឹងឃើញថាគេចង់បានសុខដែរអញ្ចឹងលោករកវិធីសាស្ត្ររស់ដោយវិធីសាស្ត្រផ្សេងវិញអញ្ចឹងណាអាចមានសំណួរសួរថាអើយបើអញ្ចឹងមិនលោកឆាន់សាច់ដែរចុះអានឹងគេហៅបើភាសានៅក្នុងធម៌ថាប្រសង់ហ្នឹងឆាន់ ready food លោកមិនបានកំងថាអូញោមឯងត្រូវយកអាបកងស្រស់មកអីមកឯងចឹងអ្វីដែលអ្នកស្រុកមានហ្នឹងលោកគ្រាន់តែទៅសុំបិណ្ឌបាតតែមួយឆ្អែតទេប៉ុណ្ណឹងឯងអញ្ចឹងណាប៉ុន្តែបើនិយាយដោយត្រង់នៅក្នុងធម៌ការប៉ះពាល់ដល់ជីវិតអ្នកដទៃនឹងធ្វើឲ្យអ្នកដទៃកើតទុក្ខអានឹងវាជាអំពើមិនល្អហើយជាអកុសលហើយអញ្ចឹងណា
Okay, we have time for a few more questions.
Hello. អញ្ចឹងជាបឋមខ្ញុំសូមថ្លែងគុំលោកគ្រូគុណសុភាព ហើយនឹងសួស្តីអ្នកទាំងអស់គ្នាចាខ្ញុំចង់សួរមួយចំណុចថាដើម្បីលើកទឹកចិត្តខ្លួនឯងដ៏មានប្រសិទ្ធភាពតើយើងគួរធ្វើម៉េច Yes. The first I would like to respect Venerable Kou Sopheap and Mr. Scott and Dr. Susan. Yes, and all of you here. Yeah, and I want to ask Venerable Kou Sopheap. Yes, how to convince yourself? Yeah, that's all.
I think Scott has so many tips to help you maybe how to motivate yourself to do your work, to challenge the problem.
Well, it is, I must say, it is difficult. However, you need to make the first step as small as it is. It doesn't cost money, it takes compassion. And if you don't have the money, there are so many ways to help. Grandmothers who may live alone, they have no one to talk to, they may need help with around their house. Those are the first steps you take. If you can give money, that's good, but give it for the right reasons. Give it without expecting anything in return. Avoid giving it and taking a photo of yourself, giving the money. It has to be done with the right compassion. And if you take the first step, the second step is easier. The third step is easier again. It really is a matter of finding the right motivation through the compassion, expecting nothing in return, and letting it evolve from there.
Okay, thank you Scott for sharing. ចេះបើឧទាហរណ៍ថាយើងរៀងអស់សង្ឃឹមអញ្ចឹងណាបើអាចនៅជាមួយអ្នកណាដែលរៀង positive បន្តិចណាហើយកុំសូវនៅជាមួយអ្នក sad ណាហើយជាពិសេសកុំសូវមើល Facebook ឬក៏ដូចថា friend ហ្នឹងវាចូលចិត្តផុសរឿង sad ទៅវាឆ្លង sad ដល់យើងណាអាត្មាមានfriend ច្រើនដែរប៉ុន្តែបើអ្នកណាចូលចិត្ត sad ពេកសុំទោសហើយសុំ unfriend សិន I'm willing to help but don't post it too much because it's cost you depression and stress ហើយបើយើងធ្វើ self reflection ណាបើនិយាយប្រាប់ខ្លួនឯងត្រូវនិយាយប្រាប់ពាក្យឲ្យព្រោះបន្តិចយើងទម្លាប់ប្រាប់អូខេទៅសិនណាទៅចាប់ផ្ដើមសិនណាធ្វើសិនណា I think Scott already mentioned that move the first step okay and then I remember when I went to the US for my master program joint program with Penyasat. At the very first day I entered the school, the professor gave us 15 assignments. And I was alone and a monk. I feel scared. How can I complete 15 assignments for the first day? And then I told myself, okay, start even one sentence, okay? Just start it. Start it. If you don't start, you cannot find the end. So start first, okay? And then continue. I think I remember the quote, Chinese quote, is that?
The trip of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Susan.
I hope the students who think I give too much homework were paying attention to that. Is there another question that anyone, okay, several now. So one here and then over here.
First of all, respect to Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap, respect to Mr. Scott Nelson, and respect to Dr. Susan. Yes, my name is Somnang. I have two questions to Mr. Scott. The first question, I would like to ask you, how many people did you have to our Cambodians? The first question. And the second question, I want to ask you about what is your problems during you work in Cambodia? Yes. Thank you.
In answer to the first question of how many people need my help in Cambodia, I don't know. I look after this community and I understand that I can help a certain number of people well. It's my belief that there's a lot of people in Cambodia that needs help, and other people need to make that first step towards helping them. Unless people take that responsibility, we won't change. We won't change the country. We won't change the world. I try not to look at the entire country. I think I would be overwhelmed. It's not a problem that I can solve as just one person. I'd like to motivate people to do the same. I'd like people to take on their own responsibilities. However, I try not to get overwhelmed with trying to help the entire world. In terms of our programs, we have so many overlaid programs. There's 45 in total. The most basic being we have a maternal care program for mothers who are pregnant. We have kindergarten, daycare, special needs. The biggest piece, of course, is education and the medical clinic. But every facet, I think, is essential. We have education, because that is what will change a generation. There is leadership, so that each student who finishes our program can change the lives of their own families, perhaps their own village, perhaps go on to influence a lot of people. And then there is the granny program, where we try to instill the values, wisdom, Cambodian culture, Buddhism into each student, so that they're not just well educated and good leaders, but they have compassion, a heart and soul. We try and instill those values, and they're the three main pillars for each of our students.
To add on a little bit to Scott's answer to the first question, going back to Greenleaf, he talks about how the servant leader has a high level of awareness of their own values and their own abilities. So I think for each person, the way that they can contribute is very unique to them. So one person might do it the way that Scott did it. Other people might find that they have special gifts that they can give in other ways. So I think that's always something to keep in mind. And as he says, the important thing is taking that first step, and then it grows from there. And there's a young man over here with a question.
Okay, thank you. For the first of all, I would like to respect to Venerable Kou Sopheap and Mr. Scott. And so my question is to the both of you. So my question is, what the value are most important to you as a leader? Okay, this is my question.
say to be able to win over my ego, my selfishness, my jealousy, my sadness, my anger, and all those the priority. Once if I could do that, I am free and be able to help people more. That is the important thing. Thank you, Scott.
Yes, I agree with Venerable Sopheap. For me, it is about leading by example, ensuring that what you say is what you do is what you say. You want to have people who want to follow your example, as opposed to be fearful, scared of what might happen to them if they don't follow. It's far better to motivate and inspire than to threaten or try and use purely financial rewards.
Okay, we have time for one final question. All right.
I would like to give a respect to Venerable Dr. Kou Sopheap, Mrs. Scott, and Dr. Susan. To Mrs. Scott, I want to know that how can we teach people in a way that inspire them to help others? Thank you.
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if I know the answer. I mean, again, I think the most important thing is to show people by example, ensure that they understand the authenticity of what I do, ensuring that you're not there with any expectations of what you're going to get back, suspending judgment, not judging either those that work for you, those that you are helping. I think this is better from Venerable Sopheap.
Thank you, Scott. ចេះនិយាយខ្មែរចុះណាអញ្ចឹងណា បើយើងនិយាយពីការធ្វើបុណ្យណាយើងជួយគេហ្នឹងក៏ឈ្មោះថាបុណ្យមួយដែរណាហើយបុណ្យហ្នឹងបានផលបច្ចុប្បន្នគឺយើងសប្បាយចិត្តពេលឃើញគេរួចផុតពីទុក្ខលំបាកមកអញ្ចឹងណាហើយមួយទៀតដែលក្នុងធម៌បង្ហាញគឺថាបុណ្យហ្នឹងជាពូជដែលនឹងផ្ដល់ផលត្រឡប់មកវិញឧទាហរណ៍ថាយើងញញឹមដាក់គេញញឹមដាក់យើងវិញញញឹមដាក់កញ្ចក់មិនអីញញឹមដាក់យើងវិញយ៉ាងណាបុណ្យដែលយើងបានធ្វើហ្នឹងមានអានិសង្សក្នុងធម៌ដូចថាឲ្យមាន motivation មួយថាអូខេជា humanity យើងជួយអ្នកពិបាកប៉ុណ្ណឹងក្នុងធម៌ថាមិនមែនគ្រាន់តែធ្វើឲ្យចោលទេវាជាសម្ពាយបុណ្យរបស់យើងទៅណាមកណាជួបមនុស្សល្អមនុស្សក៏ស្រឡាញ់ទេវតាក៏ចូលចិត្តហើយអ្នកដែលចូលចិត្តជួយអ្នកដទៃចែករំលែកទានអ្នកនឹងដាំពូជរស់ស៊ីធូអ្នកដែលកំណាញ់ស្វិតគិតតែពីខ្លួនឯងដាំពូជរស់ស៊ីតឹងទៅណាមកណាគេមិនស្រឡាញ់គេមិនចូលចិត្តទេអញ្ចឹងណាអញ្ចឹងវាមានឲ្យយើងពន្យល់ថាអានឹងជា humanity យើងត្រូវធ្វើហើយយើងពន្យល់រហូតដល់ថាអានឹងវាមានអានិសង្សសម្រាប់យើងត្រឡប់មកវិញទៀតអញ្ចឹងណាអានឹងដូចថាជា motivation សម្រាប់យើងធ្វើល្អបន្ថែមទៀតអូខេអរគុណច្រើន
Okay, and our final question.
Kana sum thoại cùng lộc bóng. Hello, Mr. Scott, and hello, teacher. Yeah. Last but not least. So my question is for Mr. Scott. Yes. I think your life before is a premium life, a luxury life. My question is, how you cut your life? I mean the past, you in the past, the luxury life and nowadays. Can you compare? What are the different? I mean, what are the inside of your head? I mean the meaning of life that you change from the old one of you and nowadays you. Yeah, thank you.
I don't think you'd want to see what was inside my head, but one of the questions I get asked a lot is, do I ever miss my life in Hollywood in the film business? And the answer is, of course. I mean, I was, on a Sunday, I would take my boat out with a group of my friends and would go across the islands, drop anchor. Sundays these days, I'm generally by the landfill, working with some of the younger children who are in foster programs with the grandparents. So I do miss those wonderful Sundays. However, I think the bigger question is, relates to the meaning of life. I had done that, and I was doing it over and over again. Well, you know, the movies were becoming successful, doing it again. You satiate, you fill your materialistic needs over and over again. And as I said below, it becomes a matter of, I've got an iPhone 10, I need an iPhone 11. There's nothing left to do. Since a young age, I really wanted to ensure I made the most of my life. I never in a million years expected it would be quite so extreme. So I've made the decisions based on having a full life. I didn't expect that my life here would be so full, that there'd be so many people who were benefiting from the programs. That wasn't the intention, but it's certainly a very happy outcome for me.
Okay, thank you for the wonderful questions from the audience and the excellent answers from our speakers. Before we close the program, I would like to invite LC Business School's director, Mr. Hambonaran, to come to the stage to present some small souvenirs to our special speakers. Okay, I'd like to thank you very much for joining this evening. And please remember to follow LC Business School on social media to receive updates about our bachelor and master's degree programs, our special events, and upcoming short courses and certificate programs. And thank you again so much for being with us on this very special occasion. Good night.
បាទសូមបងប្អូននៅកន្លែងសិនសូមមុនព្រះអង្គទៅមុនហើយលោកស្កតបាទវាគ្មិនទៅមុនបាទព្រះអង្គអាចមុនបានបងអរគុណ